Welcome, Tiny Hands, Big Dreams, here on the homestead in southern Ecuador. I never knew about nixtamalized corn until I did, which is how these things go. But it's kind of amazing and awesome. If you've never heard about it, it's a cool word, nixtamalized.
It's fun to say.
It's fun to say. It is uniquely a very important thing that Americans don't generally know about.
North
Americans, unless you're of Hispanic origin or you make tortillas.
Now, it is what makes tortillas or like corn chips smell and taste the way that they do, which we all kind of know. Like, if you think about a corn tortilla, if you've ever had one, you're like, oh, that smell and that taste. And
I never knew.
Corn, if you just have dry corn and you grind it, it does not make that.
You have cornbread chips.
But it won't even stay together because it does not have the right structure. It simply will not work.
Yeah, so, and it turns out it's also not as nutritious. And here's where North Americans, Europeans, kind of screwed up. So they came to the other world, old world, I don't know, the other side of the planet, and wow, look, there's these like indigenous people who live here, but they're, you know,
specifically in Central South America.
Right. Oh, they eat this thing, corn. It's a grain. Wow, this is cool. We could grow it. Oh, you live on it. Yes, it's a staple product. Okay, we'll take some back. They forgot to ask how they cook it. So it turns out that cooking is critical to the process, and somehow the native peoples over many thousands of years, it goes back
4,000 years, they've been nixtamalizing corn.
At least. It turns out that they were making it by boiling it with wood ash.
Now that was one potential historical fact. It was either wood ash or the literal vessel they were cooking it in was limestone.
Okay.
Yes.
Which provides the calcium. So there's a chemical reaction that happens.
So it was sort of by accident, potentially.
But if you eat just corn, and you'll hear it a lot of times, like, you can't just feed animals corn, they'll sort of starve to death, it's nutritionally devoid. And you look at it, well, it's got this much protein, it's got this and that. The nutritional label doesn't say how available it is.
And that's true of everything.
That's true of everything. So they had figured out that by cooking it a certain way, they make the nutrients bioavailable, which means they could survive on it and not just die of starvation eating it.
Well, and they wouldn't, there's actually a disease, and I didn't write it down, of course. It's the one thing I didn't write down, which is, I think, a niacin deficiency in people. So that's what happened in, like, southern United States. They started to eat more corn. They didn't have this information, and they actually ended up all getting very, very ill from a lack of nutrients because they did not realize they weren't getting the nutrients it says that you get. Little details in how you eat.
The devil is in the details, as they say. So we thought, hey, corn is cheaper than the questionable byproduct heavy animal food fodder.
Like the super processed.
It's the leftover, like the middlings and the things and the something of all the different processes and the seeds from making fruit juice. And okay.
Always great.
Okay, I get it. You analyze it all in the lab. It's got the right things, and an animal like a pig could survive on it. They say corn, you really can't on corn. What about nixtamalized corn? It makes proteins more available. It makes your selenium, your niacin, your lysines.
Basically, everything that is in the corn kernel is now available to consume, to absorb. Yes. And for us particularly, I got into the research, and I'm like, oh, wait, and started doing all this like I do. We are selenium deficient here, and we were going through a whole bunch of struggles with trying to like get enough for our animals and then for us, because clearly that will affect us. And I'm like, oh, selenium. You can actually get a lot more selenium out of your corn when you nixtamalize it.
Corn's known to be not terribly digestible. It's also got some antagonistic parts to it that don't help. It also will generally have some level of mycotoxin.
Which is mold.
Mold.
You don't.
Mycotoxin, which is really bad, and they'll spray things on commercial corn to get it to not have mold. The corn we get here is all natural. It's grown. It's locally processed.
Because it's a humid environment, when it's dried, it still has some level of moisture on it. You see
some of the ends of some of the kernels. They get a little dark bit.
Now, some animals will process that better. It is less. It is less bad for, say, pigs. Not that it's good. Mycotoxins are bad for everyone. Goats especially can die from mycotoxins. Yeah. They're just more susceptible as a ruminant. So when I was looking at, what to feed the goats and I was feeding them just plain cracked corn, I'm like, well, that might not be good for them.
Yeah, the mycotoxins is pretty serious. Turns out that the cooking in an alkaline environment with cal or the wood ash nixtamalizing neutralizes, what was it,
97 to 100% of mycotoxins.
Wow, solves another problem. So we tried it on, we did a whole round of pigs because we were using commercial bought feed, which is a protein-rich premix, and then you mix it with a regular corn just as a caloric supplement.
And it worked. But
and it works.
Was costly, and we were trying to be more cost efficient, effective.
Sure.
We were also, I don't love there's a lot of
there's a lot of unknowns in that bag.
Yeah, it just says byproduct or a
you don't know
product,
how clean the process is, how many mycotoxins were in that, or a lot of other things. And lately in the bags, we've actually seen they're adding some sort of chemical to kill mycotics molds. Oh.
Which, I mean, I don't want the mold, but I also don't really want whatever chemical that is. We're not
so
the chemical.
We ran through an entire litter of piglets, raised them up to harvest weight, harvested them.
On corn and scraps and nature.
And then the next batch of piglets were gestated.
Gestated.
Oh, look at me, word. Gestated on pretty much that as a diet.
Yes, actually 100%. She ate nothing but the corn.
And the ground and the weeds.
The ground, scraps. And I did, for the pigs specifically, for the mama pig, I was putting in actual meat, which is a little bit of an oddball. I know people will be like, ah.
Yeah, it was scraps from when we'd buy beef, and it's the unusable outside sinew thing, and she just grind up it into...
And cook it.
And cook it.
So whatever potential bacteria things is all cooked, and add a little bit into her food to give her that extra bit of protein that I think she needs.
Not a ton, it's just a little bit.
A little bit.
Those piglets came out some of our best ever. They popped out. They're like they're just little bruisers. They're doing so good. They're already switching on to regular food. You know, a week, 2 weeks ahead of where they should be. They look amazing. They also had better teeth, which was a bit of a problem.
They're very strong.
Previous litters, we didn't have. We had a few problems with them where they kind of play fight a bit to get nipples, and they have like little teeth that injure each other. We had a few problems. We had a lot more problems, and they had big, strong teeth.
Stronger teeth.
You know, they're getting extra calcium ions.
And this does, of course, boost your calcium a lot, which you have to be careful that you're not overdoing that.
Healthy piglets. So we sort of wanted the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Pig pudding.
Corn pudding was where I was going with that.
I like alliterations.
So
it has worked for pigs.
It has worked wonderfully.
We also feed our birds, at this point just chickens, but we were also feeding the ducks because it increases niacin absorption, which ducks need specifically, and the selenium, which we are low on for birds. And
which is critical for the birds and the goats.
So we feed all of our animals corn, and they all seem to do very well on it. Yeah.
So we're going to make some. We're going to show you exactly how it's done. There's a lot of varying recipes of various clarity. We're going to try to make it real simple.
It's real simple.
It's real simple.
The process is not complicated because it needed to be simple. 1 gram of cal, lime. It has other names depending on where you
Calcium hydroxide is the official scientific name. They call it cal here, just cal, C-A-L. But it's calcium hydroxide.
In the States, it was lime. It was a particular kind of lime.
Lime can mean several things in the States.
It's kind of complicated.
You ask for calcium hydroxide.
Because otherwise you'll get like some sort of other lime that you don't want and is not edible.
Right.
So it is 100 grams of corn and 1 gram of cal.
Yes.
So 1% cal.
Whole corn.
Whole corn.
Don't crush it.
I have not done it, but I have read it's a very, very bad mess because it gelatinizes into this giant goo pile.
Yeah. Now our cal is crappy. It's just not a great process. One, it's not heated enough. It's not pure. Not all of it dissolves in water. There's some rocks and stuff in there.
You get a big crust on the bottom.
We end up adding a little extra to account for it's not pure. and it's a low-grade product, so we add a little extra, and then we end up with some.
I usually add about a third extra, just to be safe.
And then
there's a good bit.
You rinse it at the end, which is a pretty simple thing. I built a little. Actually, we used it for sorting gravel.
And coffee.
And coffee. And now we use it for the corn.
Yeah.
So you weigh out your corn, you weigh out your cow, close.
Now,
that's all.
If you're going to do this a lot, I knew I wasn't going to weigh it every time.
Right.
So we have some footage. There's just, I have a soup pot, and I know how full the soup pot has to be for a pound of corn. And I just measure those out, and then the same amount. I know where on a soup pot to measure the cow to, because I wasn't going to weigh it every time.
Again, these are rough measurements that you don't have to hit it exactly.
Exactly.
So after you measure it all into the pot, you're going to cook it just a little bit.
With water.
The water is an important part. Now, if you start your pot very full, bad day. Corn absorb water. Corn get big.
I definitely tried to do a 25-pound bag. So I'm like, well, it'd be great if just the whole bag I could put in the...
Half pot or less is good. You're also going to run out of water. So it boils for, how long do you boil it for?
So you want it to come up to boil, and then you turn down to just simmer. Now, if you are nixtamalizing corn for yourself and you're going to then grind it into a flour, a paste, and make tortillas or something, you don't have to cook it all the way to soft. We do, because that's how the pigs like it.
Yeah.
Little pigs too, and they really.
They're still solid kernels, but they're just soft.
They're squishy.
Yeah.
And the little pigs really enjoy it that way.
Turns out pigs, they have a really weird mouth. They have a durable, soft palate, I think it's called.
Yeah, and the piglets have less real crunching teeth.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that now that they're eating, they really don't do well when it's a little bit undercooked.
They like to smush mush.
Smush mush. So I make sure that I cook it, when I'm simmering it, then the check to make sure it's done is if you can kind of dent your thumbnail in the kernel.
Okay.
And then you let it sit 12 hours.
This process also dissolves the pericarp.
Yeah.
Which helps release nutrient and removes, is it an antitoxin or an anti-nutrient?
I think so, yeah. I think the pericarp is just, it's a negative.
But the water. So corn, water, and then as it absorbs, you're going to have to probably add a little more water. Totally normal.
The simmering process, I usually make sure I add more water when I shut it off and let it sit so that it can absorb, because that's also part of how it finishes softening. Otherwise it will still be crunchy in the morning. Now we either do this at night and let it sit until morning, or at the beginning of the day for nighttime.
Yep.
And I don't do this every day.
It takes a long time to cool down. Also, you want to, while it's coming up to temp and boiling, you want to stir it every so often.
A few times. So just so it doesn't stick.
Yeah.
Make sure it doesn't run out of water or it will burn, and yes, we've done that. Because it's down here and you forget about it.
Yeah. One of these the crab pot boilers does wonders. Sweet. Let's light it.
You have to attach the propane first. Every time. Every time.
That is too much fire.
A little bit too much.
There. Good fire.
And you watch it, it comes up to boil. It's a good stir, turn it down.
Yeah.
And then when it, like I said, once you can dent the kernel with your nail, then you shut it off, make sure it's got lots of water. Shut it off, and
it's going to swell and absorb more.
And then, yeah, around 12 hours. I've let it go longer. The one thing I'll note, I have noticed, at least in our warm climate, it really likes to ferment after the fact. So if you're doing a large batch that's going to last days, which I do because it uses less propane that way, I've actually started leaving it in its cal water. It keeps it from getting funky. We were just
once you
rinsing it
rinse
all.
off the alkali coating, your pH is more neutral, and the water has whatever the water has in it, the air has whatever the air has. All of a sudden,
bucket has whatever your bucket has.
It's going to take off and uncontrolled fermentation.
Which I'm not a big fan of. Neither were the animals, especially goats. You don't want the ferment; they just won't touch it.
Yeah.
So I just leave it in the cal water and I rinse it as needed for the animals, and then it keeps pretty well.
Great. So let's come back
In the dark
after
time.
it's done cooking. Dark time coming. And dark time. Stir the old pot. Yeah, so the stirrer is a thing the kid made. We sort of didn't have one, and he's like, I'm going to do it. And he just started playing with tools and sticks and things, and we let him a lot of times kind of just...
It's actually pretty good.
Yeah, have free reign with, like he just wants to make a thing. So he made a spatula. We broke it this afternoon.
Actually broke it. But it actually works really, really well to scrape the bottom of the pot.
But he took a chunk of wood and he went and he cut it and he things and he screwed it all together. And we're like, actually, okay, looks a little caveman-y, but it does a good job. And he likes taking part in making things. Now, it has cooked for a while. We've turned it down to a simmer. The corn dents with a fingernail, and bueno.
We'll fill it up with water and let it sit overnight.
And that's it. Yeah, we're just going to shut it down, put the lid on it, call it a night. So there we go. I hope this helps you. This has been a Tiny Hen's Big Dreams special culinary episode of how to make nixtamalized corn easy. Subscribe if you haven't. Also, there's a newsletter if you send us your email. It's really cool, actually. All right, have a good one. Randomly, these are our bananas. If you've never seen bananas growing on a tree, they're kind of magnificent and wonderful. These happen to be delicious. They sort of taste closer to what banana candy is, and not the bananas you know about.